And welcome to the polling station. This week, events in Scotland have taken yet another incredible turn, and I am joined by, I think it's fair to say, an absolute expert to help us guide through those issues. Thanks very much for joining us, Jennifer Jones, who is a reporter at the Stranraer and Wigtownshire Free Press. Jennifer, thanks for joining us. How are you?
I am good, thanks. You got Stranraer right. Happy with that. Yeah, it is a mouth.
Yes, 1 out of 2. I will more than take 1 out of 2.
Oh, you got both of them, so it's a
Oh,
mouthful usually. So well done.
thank you very much. A good start to this. So we're here and we are discussing. I think it's fair. There's only one place to start. Nicola Sturgeon. Explain basically for those of us who will be watching from England who won't have that much of a knowledge of Scott poll. What exactly is going on, as simply as you can?
Simply as you can. Well, we're facing the final chapter of an ongoing saga that has been on since the kind of end of 2018, when complaints were made against the former First Minister Alex Salmond about sexual harassment, and that led to a court case. But before that, there was errors were found, and Alex Salmond was able to challenge the government's investigation and managed to get £500,000 worth of compensation from the Scottish government. And what's been happening in the last couple of weeks, I mean, this is a very, very short version, is that there's been an inquiry, was a parliamentary inquiry, and there's also been an independent review that Nicola Sturgeon referred herself to see if she has misled the government. That is the James Hamilton inquiry that was found out yesterday. And then there's been a parliamentary review about how the Scottish government has let down the complainants of the sexual harassment case. I think I did that. So what is happening at the moment is the results of the parliamentary case came out, but the big plot twist is that the partisan or the cross party, there's depending on who you speak to, the cross party group, somebody has leaked the results to the press on Monday. So it kind of took away from the results this morning because we already knew what was there. So at the moment, so in about an hour's time, the Conservative Party in Scotland have put a motion against the First Minister as a vote of no confidence. So we'll find out at 4 o'clock. However, they haven't been, because it's a minority government and the Greens won't stand by it, it's suspected that it won't go through, but they've kept it going anyway. So it is a big issue in the sense that depending on what side of the political spectrum that you're on and what you believe in, depends on how you view it. So it's as splitting as maybe the constitutional question that overhangs everything we do in Scotland.
And how has this changed people's opinion of the SNP, especially with regards to the elections coming up in May?
It's difficult to say because for people that are really interested in politics and are really interested in journalism, this has been an ongoing thing for years in terms of maybe if you're involved in Twitter. So a percentage of people will have been following this. I mean, even like the way of explaining it seems complicated for people outside of Scotland. However, we don't know is the answer because we aren't able to get the same face-to-face dialogue with voters. We're unable to people are unable to chat doors. They're unable to speak to people that potentially might vote for them. So we're dealing with an online election with this hanging over it that might be bigger or smaller than we actually think, because the job I do, I speak to all different colours of politicians, and in a previous life I've been friends with politicians, and they will tell you that you find out on the doorstep the real understanding of what people are going to vote for, rather than going on social media, because social media can really trick you into thinking something's going to go ahead and it doesn't. So the answer is we don't know.
And just regarding that, would there be any reason to be a little bit more cautious of some of the Holyrood polling we've seen? Because we now, of course, even have a model coming from the New Statesman with impressive amounts of data. Now, generally speaking, I think I've interviewed plenty of people on the polling station before, and people have used models in different ways. Would there be any doubts, just a bit, about how people might react to what happens today, what's happened over the last week when it comes to the actual real thing in May?
Yeah. So, I mean, to help, I'm actually based in the southwest of Scotland, which is a rural patch, and we're often the argument for where we are is it's the forgotten corner because a lot of decisions are made in the central belt in Edinburgh, which is hundreds of miles away, or funding isn't distributed, or there is an element that we are ignored by other parts of Scotland in the same way as some people in Scotland might feel they're being ignored by Westminster. So there's that narrative in the space that we're in when I'm speaking to like readers. So in terms of people, like the view of the individual in Scotland outside of the central belt is often not captured in a lot of these discussions. So the feeling is that the SNP nationally might do pretty well, but I'm not sure they'll do well here, but they've never done well here. So so it's very difficult to say from speaking to people, but I know a lot of people down here would like to see a focus on local issues when as opposed to the national question of Scotland should be independent or not. And at the moment, the SNP and the Scottish Conservative parties are currently putting themselves in a position, so it's a proxy for independence or not. So that really, as we go into a new election for the Scottish Parliament, which is about devolved issues, if people are focusing on the yes-no question and not focusing on the actual running of the government after the pandemic, it's going to be a very interesting space to be kind of making predictions, because it's so hard from a distance to like make these assumptions, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. I think it's something that we're actually dealing with in all the nations of the UK at the moment. You did mention the SNP and the Scottish Conservatives. Scottish Labour has been talked about quite a bit, particularly, especially with their new leader. What does the road ahead look like for them?
Yeah, so I mean, the SNP have been in power for 14 years here. It's looking from the polling that there's going to be a slim minority or perhaps a shared government with the Green Party. The Labour Party needs to make itself relevant to the current Scottish vote. And unfortunately, because there's a yes-no divide, where the Labour Party sits with a relatively new leader and the investment from the new press office, etc., is going to be really interesting in this campaigning mode. I mean, they only just got Anas recently, Anas Sarwar as a new leader. They're starting to, Keir Starmer was up a couple of days ago trying to make discussion about who they are as a Labour Party, because they lost. I mean, Labour Party was the biggest party here 14 years ago, and now it's barely, there's barely a presence, and people don't know what they are in relation to the yes-no question. So I think it's going to be interesting to times to see what angle they do take as a new party, because it's almost like a clean slate post Corbyn, post Richard Leonard.
Indeed. So we do have odds on the May elections based around the SNP's total performance and a majority. We are 8 to 11. They do get a majority just over the line. That has tightened a fair bit from even recent days, because that was a 4 to 7 shot. And we're also evens for the SNP not to get a majority. If I had to push you, and I'm afraid I do you think they'll get over the line and get a majority or not?
I don't think they'll get a majority, but I'm down in the southwest of Scotland, so the people I engage with, it's predicted to go Conservative. It was already Conservative, but interestingly, it's looking like it might be some list seats in Conservative as well. I don't know if I think they got in 2016, I think that they thought it was a sure bet they were going to get a majority, and they didn't, but they did form a coalition, well, like a voting pact with the Greens that allowed them to push through, so they consider it a pro-Indy coalition. I think they probably aim to go for that again this year, but I mean, I'm of the personal position that we need to be focusing on the sort of recovery post-pandemic. So I think for a lot of people, that might be the sticking point. Do they see Indy Ref on the ballot and want an indie ref, or do they go, wait a minute, now is not the time to have something like that, and that might be that might be a really good idea to put that on the ballot paper, or that might be the thing where people go, actually, wait a minute, that's a lot of disruption for a period of time that we've just had a lot of disruption. So that could be, it's a difficult position for the party to put themselves in, because it really does show what people are wanting. And I've got a gut feeling there might be more of a want for a recovery post-pandemic. So that's why I don't see the majority happening. But again, that's couched in the southwest of Scotland context.
Well, indeed, we'll be following that through the rest of the election period here on the polling station. Another of the big questions that we are asking people to put their money where their mouth is on independence actually taking place. Now, we've got a market on whether there'll be an independence referendum or IndyRef 2 before the end of 2025. Admittedly, some might say a fairly narrow window. Would you suggest that's more likely than not, or the other way around?
Again, I think this is just, as your numbers are showing, I think this is going to split people right down the middle. And I don't think a majority, it will need to be a clear majority rather than a 50-50 majority if we're going to want to have another 5 years of the sort of Remain Leave discourse that's been going on. You're going to get people that, I think for 2014, there was a sense of optimism, and there was a sense of this could be a progressive new space, and a lot of new voices got into politics. I think in 2021, you've got exhausted people who have been in Parliament for a long time. You've got activists who have been banging the same drum for a long time, and people are entrenched in their views. So it'll be a very different independence referendum. And then within each side, you've got factions from the gradualists to the populists. And you're not going to get the same feeling where folk were like a kind of grey area, undecided, where they could go away. I think Nicola Sturgeon's delivery of the pandemic and how she's taking people through, like from September, October, did see that peak, because you were seeing leadership in contrast to Westminster. But now, I think, as the reality kicks in with unlocking, getting past this next part of the pandemic, it is really difficult to see how people would be able to move away from their entrenchment, especially after a year of being locked in the house, only following stuff that you agree with. So there's a real entrenchment, there's a sort of bitterness, resentfulness from both extremes. And then the people who are trying to figure out if their vote's going to be wasted, if they vote for Labour or they vote for a party that's not to do with yes, no, is going to be the kind of tricky bit to navigate over the next 44 days.
Indeed. And last but not least, now, Nicola Sturgeon would appear to be, and certainly the vibes are that she may be out of the woods regarding her latest troubles, but we do have a market on the next Scottish First Minister.
Yeah.
Which names would you be thinking about?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, because you've got experience that's been there for a long time, and anyone that's tried to even put their name in the hat has been trying to do it in different ways. I mean, there's been the whole Joanna Cherry fiasco, where she sort of took the kind of populist route towards to try and see herself as a new leader, and a lot of that was speaking to the press before conference or using social media, often to detriment. So she was sort of framed as the next leader. I don't think she will be. I think there needs to be some sort of, if the SNP are to get a majority or a minority government, there needs to be some sort of element to encourage more people into politics, so the next leader is almost prepared for it, so there's a handover. I think this possibly will be Nicola Sturgeon's last term, but it's again, there isn't a government in waiting there isn't leaders in waiting, because Nicola's been this, a bit like the Queen, this person that's been the consistent for a long period of time. The SNP have been in power for 14 years. I think the next term, 5 years, is going to be where we're going to see there have to be some training. There has to be, because the people that were lined up for leader are no more. Like, there's a Derek Mackay incident, and then there was the stuff with Joanne Cherry. So we'll start to see who I think this election will be the battle for the soul of the SNP, and they need to start handing over power to the next generation, and also provide an incentive to get involved in politics, because at the moment, like, would you want to like be part of this where you are just facing online abuse, or the working hours, or the waiting for to be tripped up over something using social media? There's got to be a lot of, and also the kind of outcome of the James Hamilton report. There's so much stuff that needs to be in place to like actually encourage people to want to be in politics or to be a leader. There's so many people from the SNP are retiring who have retired and not standing. So all those people that would have been leaders or have the experience to be leaders aren't there. So I think we're going to see in the next 18 months to 2 years who that potential might be, because I can't see Nicola even wanting to. If I was her, I'd be like, that's enough. I've brought you to the end of this pandemic. I've got us out of this, and now let's move on. She deserves it.
That's, by the way, some very pertinent points about wanting to be involved in politics for the right reasons. I get the feeling we're about to see a pretty stark generational clash of motivation to get into politics, which is definitely something worth keeping an eye on. Would you have any names in mind? When 9-2 Angus Robertson and 11-2 John Swinney, 11-2 Kate Forbes, and 8-1 Joanna Cherry, with Hamza Youssef at 10s and 12s bar?
Yeah. I mean, I think Kate Forbes has done a fantastic job for, like, they've been given that role and then straight into the pandemic and then having to like manage that situation. So she's definitely got leadership material there. And I think, Angus Robertson, again, that's back to the proxy between Angus Robertson and Joanna Cherry. It's gradualism versus populism. So there's people in the party who want to push ahead and have an independence referendum before we do anything else, and then there's people that are going to have a more sensible approach and look at the bigger context of recovery from the pandemic. So I would probably go for the Angus Robertson before I would go for Joanna Cherry.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, one last little thing to tie up the show, or actually two little things to tie up the show. Firstly, it's been about a year of Keir Starmer being the Labour Party leader. I'm going to be asking all the guests on this show how they think he's done. So in about 30 seconds or so, how do you think he's done, and what would you give him out of 10?
Yeah. See, this would probably get me so cancelled from Scottish Twitter, but I did spend like 6.5 years living in England. If I still lived in Leicester, I would vote for Keir Starmer. I would still be involved. I'd still vote for the Labour Party. I moved back to Scotland. I moved back to Scotland in 2012, so that had an impact on my politics, I guess. So the problem is that he's got a big job to do to win over Scotland. But if it was for the English voters, certainly, I think he's started the job in a pandemic with a large Tory majority, and that's going to be there for several more years. There's no election coming up. So I think it's a difficult job, but he's been asking questions. It's very difficult to say. It'd be interesting to see what he's campaigning and to see what comes out of this Scottish election, and if he's going to stand by Annis in his campaigning, because there is a feeling that Scotland has been, the Scottish Labour Party has been abandoned by the London branch. So if he puts in the effort with Scotland, then, and there's an electable Labour Party, I would love that, because I feel a little bit like I would have voted Labour, but I can't. So there you go.
And last but never least, if you head to the Star Sports website, well, hopefully you're there already, seeing as you're watching this, we've got a couple of specials. Now, a man called Donald Trump was once president of a country called the United States of America. Now, he was banned from Twitter for entirely good reason, I should add. And he's planning a comeback, apparently. So we've gone 4-1 on Donald Trump to launch his own social media platform on or before the US Independence Day, 4th of July, and 5-1 for Donald Trump to post from his own official Twitter account on or before Independence Day, again, 4th of July. Jennifer, to wrap this up, do you think either of those things will happen?
I think there'll be a lot of noise about it, but I don't think they'll be there by July. I think it's one of those things where social media, you can make a lot of noise about something without having to do it. So yeah, if you want to set up his own social media, then it will. But I don't see it happening before July, and that's the question.
Thank you very, very much for joining us, Jennifer, and I really hope we can have you at some point again, given that the elections in Holyrood are fast approaching.
Yeah, we're just heating up here, so we're about to start the free press hustings all again, all online in the paper. So strange times, but happy to help. Glad to be on.
And just quickly, actually, before we go, how can people find you more easily, and how can they find the free press's work if they want to really dig in?
So we're a very local paper, so we just do print, which is it's like old school. But the free press is on Twitter, SW Free Press, and then my Twitter account's Jennifer M for Mother Jones.
Thank you very much. That's absolutely perfect. Jennifer Jones, the polling station. Thank you.
Cheers, thanks.